Today we're going to make puppy chow. The very first part of our recipe today is going to be measuring and having everything ready to go. Before I started, I washed my hands already. You always want to make sure your hair is tied back, especially when we're in lab, but you also need to always wear an apron. We have aprons for you when you're in lab, so you don't have to worry about that, but those are things to not only protect yourself, but your food and the surroundings and other people as well. The very first part of puppy chow is 2 tablespoons of margarine or butter. We're using margarine. It comes in sticks. We know that there are 4 sticks in a pound. I cut it so that I have exactly 2 tablespoons. Super easy to measure. The next ingredient is peanut butter. It asks for 1/4 of a cup. I'm going to use a rubber scraper. Going to reach in with my rubber scraper, pull out some peanut butter. I have my dry 1/4 cup measuring cup, and I'm going to pack that in there. And it's going to take a little bit of effort. Yeah. It's not bad though. So sometimes peanut butter separates the oil and the solids. So you want to make sure that you have it. I forgot to pull out 1 tool. But notice my leftovers. Where am I putting my leftovers? Right back into my container. And then I'm gonna set that on a paper towel back here. But I need to make sure I level it off with my metal spatula. Again, the extras go in here. My dirty stuff goes on a paper towel because it's greasy and it's gonna make a mess. 1/4 cup peanut butter. The next item is, so 1/2 cup of chocolate chips. I'm gonna pour these in there. In class, because we go through so many, we have a big container of them. You'll use a spoon and we will spoon them into the cup just like a dry ingredient. The next ingredient has to do with dry cereal. So we use Crispix in order to make puppy chow. And I'm gonna grab one more bowl. So I'm gonna measure over this bowl so it catches. I'm gonna make sure that way I don't have leftover if it falls over like I just did and they're not all over the counter. So there's 1. The recipe calls for 3.5 cups. 2, 3, and a half. So there's my 4th ingredient. Set those aside. The last thing that I need is powdered sugar. It's a dry ingredient using a 1 cup dry measuring cup. I'm going to spoon it, not scoop it. My container is holding the leftover, so if anything falls out over the edge, it drops right back inside there. So I just make sure that I'm holding my cup over my container and level that off. Easy as can be. So the very first step is to always have your ingredients measured. That's what we just did. So everything is all set, ready to go. The next thing it tells you to do is to get the double boiler. We talked about this earlier when we did our equipment. So a double boiler, we have to put enough water in the bottom of it. So it's about 1 inch or so. It depends on how deep your individual top boiler of your double boiler is. But when you set this in there, it should not touch the bottom or it's gonna scorch the ingredient. The whole idea is to keep it from burning. If I were to take this, put it on direct heat, put the chocolate chips and the butter in there and peanut butter, they would scorch and burn. The water heats up and then it in turn then heats the metal of the bottom of this pan gently so that those ingredients don't burn. So as you can see, this is dry, we're all good. So I'm gonna have that. And I choose a burner, and now I have a glass top here, so the burner is drawn on here. You don't have to worry about that, but you do have to check and choose the right burner, as well as if you're using gas, how big that flame should go. It should not go past your bottom of your pan. So I have different choices. They are bigger burners and smaller burners. I'm gonna use the burner that's the closest to this size. I don't want it ever bigger than the pan that I'm working on. You'll get burned, or you will burn your product that you're working on, or start a fire because your pan might catch on fire. So you have to be super careful. So step 3 says to take the cereal. Once you have prepped that pan, We have a set of mixing bowls that look like this. They're stainless. And there are 6 of them. It says to use a large bowl. This is an extra large one, the really, really big one. I'm gonna use the next to largest bowl, maybe, if I can get it out, to put my cereal in. So I'm gonna set those aside. And my large bowl is gonna have my cereal. I'm gonna put that in there. And I'm gonna just kind of spread it out just a little bit and give it a little shake. It does it naturally. And then it says to place the margarine and the peanut butter in the top part of my double boiler. So I'm going to do that. And if you remember right, we said to always use a rubber scraper to not only to measure with, but to remove any of these types of solids. So I'm gonna insert my rubber scraper into there because I want to get every bit of peanut butter that I can into my pan. And I can use the edge of my measuring device as well as my rubber scraper to make that process happen. And then before you stick this into a sink of hot soapy water, you want to make sure you take a paper towel to it to remove as much fat as you can, or you're going to have a greasy mess. So I just set it on some paper towels. Then I'm going to add my margarine. I can drop that in there. And while I'm using a wooden spoon, I'm going to heat this on medium heat. And I'm gonna stir. So I'm melting this slowly but surely, and I'm stirring. And the fats are blending together because both the margarine and the peanut butter are considered to be fats. So you can see the lumps, those are not peanut butter lumps, those are the margarine lumps that just haven't melted yet. And part of that is because it was refrigerated before we started. Had it been sitting out, it probably would melt a lot quicker, but it's all right. As you can see, everything is melting. The next step is I'm going to add my chocolate chips. And they too need to melt all the way. So they went from room temperature to the heated fat, and it kind of slows the process down. So we have to keep on stirring. You stir with a wooden spoon. First of all, the heat doesn't travel up to my hand, won't burn me. And second, it's much easier to hold on to and more comfortable with a wooden spoon. And the wooden spoon won't scratch the bottom of my pan. You can see it's starting to turn here a little bit. You can see the dark. All right, so I'm at total melting point here. I'm gonna turn off my heat. I'm gonna pick up the entire double boiler and put it on a silicone trivet on my counter. If I put it anywhere else, I could cause issues with burning. So now that it is done, I'm gonna take my rubber scraper. I'm gonna scrape my wooden spoon super quick so that I get all of the chocolate and the peanut butter out of there. And I'm gonna just set it aside. I'm gonna lift my pan. It's gonna have condensation on the outside, so be super careful because you don't want to add water to melted chocolate or it's gonna separate. And then I'm going to pour this. So when I add this, I don't add it all in one place. I'm going to try and spread it out when I do that. It makes stirring a little bit easier when it comes time to doing that. Not bad. And I'm gonna go back to my wooden spoon. Going to, once I've scraped that, now I'm going to stir. And it talks about tossing this. They don't mean like throw it. It means to very carefully turn these items over. It's the cereal pieces with the chocolate. We want to coat our chocolate. We don't want to crush it. So if I were stirring really crazy, really heavy, like beating it like you would regular cookies, you would have nothing but crumb mixture. And we want to have full pieces. Once this is completely coated, then we're going to add our powdered sugar. So all of the chocolate has been dispersed and covered over the cereal evenly, which is awesome. And now I'm going to very carefully add my powdered sugar. Remember, powdered sugar is different than granulated sugar. This has been crushed 10 times the size of regular granulated sugar. That's why sometimes it's called 10x, because it's 10 times as small. And I'm gonna very carefully continue. What happens is that the chocolate grabs onto the sugar and then it can separate from each other. So it doesn't have to be great big, huge chunks of this. Although you might like eating it that way, but. So after you've stirred it and stirred it and stirred it gently, if you're not careful, you will crush these. I smashed one, I heard it go. So you want to avoid that happening, but it's ready. Really turned out pretty well. So at this point, you could either consume it, in other words, eat it, or you could put it into a baggie, like a gallon-sized baggie, and keep it for another day. But be super careful you don't leave it open, or, well, it might disappear.